If only.
In the next.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that the kind of short history of Respect is that it was formed in January 2004. It went through its first year, in which it pretty rapidly expanded and generally went forward. It then, for its subsequent 2.5 years, has basically gone into reverse and into decline, to the extent where now it has around 2,000 members or just over. During that, I mean, I think the sort of brief explanation of how that decline came about was that it reached the point when people realised, A, that the SWP were exercising a very top-down control inside Respect, and B, that they had a perspective for Respect which, well, certainly we disagree with, and a lot of the independents in Respect disagreed with, and that is that they treated it as really just another campaign, or United Front of a special kind, or the electoral arm, or the electoral initiative of what they do. And we have always argued against that. We've always argued that to build a new party to the left of Labour that can seriously challenge in British politics, you can't kind of half do it. You can't be just a bit of what you do. You can only do it if it's the overarching thing that you do, and that if you build it as a political party, because unless you build it as a political party, you can't develop it politically for the task, because clearly if an organisation is going to challenge for political office and challenge for political power and put itself forward as an alternative, it has to do that on all political fronts. And that means developing as a political party, having an internal life, having its own political education, doing all the things that political parties do, in order to shape itself up to carry out the task. And for the last 2.5 years at least, since this became kind of clarified, that's been the battle that's gone on inside Respect, and it's happened at the last two conferences. The conference before last, when there was a confrontation over it, when George Galloway told us that we should all enjoy, it had a very good leadership, and we'd all enjoy and get on with it, and which caused a fair amount of friction. And then the last conference, at which by then the Respect Party platform had come together, mainly from people that were disillusioned or became critical of its direction at the previous conference. But the last conference had the Respect Party platform, and we put forward then a number of things to try to push it towards the direction of becoming a party, and basically we got trounced at the conference. Fairly small votes and huge lists of speakers against us, denouncing what we were doing and so on. And after then, generally, it has gone no further. There's more left. There's more left. I mean, for example, people in Camden that we talked to immediately before that conference basically said we'll give it one more shot and see if it's going anywhere, and if it didn't, but it didn't, they left. So it's got narrower and narrower, and more really simply predominantly SWP. That's been the process, and that general approach has existed really as an alliance between the SWP and George Galloway. Really, as far as we can see, had no differences really on this. However, we then over the last few weeks, we've had George Galloway's letter. And George Galloway's letter takes up quite a few of the things that we've been taking up over that period of time. We had a Respect Party platform meeting on Saturday, and we welcome the things that George Galloway is raising, and we can support most of them. We can certainly support what he raises in terms of democracy inside Respect, but he raises it from the point of view of appointments in the office, and people pop up and who knows who appointed them and all this kind of thing. And he also raises it from the point of view of decision making, or more precisely, the carrying out of decisions. He complains that that you could make all kinds of decisions at national council meetings, but only certain decisions that fit in with certain other agendas are the ones that are picked up and run with. Others are allowed to, as he says, wither on the vine. And it's absolutely true. I mean, that's a method that has gone on. If it fits in with another agenda, then all the power goes behind it. If it doesn't, then you never hear anything else about it, and you can bang your head in the office and you don't get anywhere. And those are valid criticisms, and we certainly support him on that. However, democracy would have to go quite a bit further than that. I mean, that's the problem as well. And the issue that we've raised over the last 2 years has been the issue of the accountability of elected representatives, which he doesn't mention. We would have to insist that this is really an extremely important issue. It's actually an issue both in terms of Westminster, and it's an issue in terms of local government. And it's a two-way thing as well. I mean, it means that there has to be, and there isn't really in Respect, there isn't a proper mechanism in Respect for what the MP is doing in Parliament feeding back into Respect. There isn't a proper mechanism for what the councillors are doing feeding back into Respect. And there isn't a proper mechanism to ensure that what they're doing is in line with the policies of Respect. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be on all occasions. I mean, there would be times when there would be clashes on policy, but they need to be properly regulated in an agreed way through the leading bodies. None of this has ever happened, but we certainly agree with him on that. We certainly agree with him when he says that Respect's public profile is entirely inadequate, and when he praises the Manchester Respect branch for producing its own newspaper and producing a tabloid. He said, as he rightly says, without that tabloid, you wouldn't be able to find Respect was at the demonstration at the Labour Party conference. You wouldn't be able to find it was at the coronation of Gordon Brown if it hadn't been for the tabloid, and that's fair comment. However, we raised at every Respect conference the need to have a national newspaper, its own national newspaper, both to put forward its views and as a mechanism for developing collective political experience and developing Respect politically. It's always been rejected. It's always been rejected both by the SWP and by George Galloway. So if he's having second thoughts in terms of a newspaper, then this would be an extremely important thing to happen. And so we hope that that's the case. We also support him on the issue of Respect's inability to take up the debates after John McDonnell's failure to get on in the ballot for Labour leader. We had a national council just before that, before John McDonnell failed to get on the list, but it was already clear that he was going to fail to get on the list, and we had a national council discussion on it, and a lot of proposals were made along the lines that this is another watershed for the Labour left, basically, and all those that argue that it's possible to reclaim the Labour Party. This is another watershed, and Respect needs to be right in on these debates. It needs to take initiatives to discuss with the Labour left, the trade union left, the Morning Star and the CPB, and all these kind of forces that must be in some kind of turmoil as a result of failure, the first failure since the 30s of the left to mount a challenge in a leadership election. And nothing came of it. And he's absolutely right to take it up. I mean, the Morning Star had a conference, the RMT had a conference that promoted discussion on this, but Respect had nothing and did nothing. And he's certainly right to take that up. And in fact, if we look even the last week, Fred has drawn my attention to the Morning Star over the last week, because I mean, and we've been arguing this. I mean, I don't know how much I've passed it around, but I made a proposal in June myself to the officers, to Respect officers, for an initiative towards CPB and the Morning Star and the trade union left, people like Bob Crow, to open up a fresh discussion on Labour representation, given that the whole situation was compounded by the McDonnell defeat, and it's never been discussed. This was June, early June, and it's never been discussed. We now find in the Morning Star this week that Rob Griffiths, who's the General Secretary of the CPB, is raising the issue for the first time. He's raised it, that it may be necessary to eventually draw the conclusion that the left can't be reclaimed, and it might be time might be coming to form a new party. He said that the final crisis approaches for the whole trade union movement and the non-sectarian left. Are we to have a mass party of Labour in Britain? ? If the Labour movement cannot or will not reclaim the Labour Party from the privatisers, the warmongers and the Thatcher fans, it would have to re-establish one. Does our movement have the leadership and vision to fulfil such a historic responsibility? I mean, it's quite a statement. Now, I'm not saying that the CPB will, as a result of that, all immediately change, but that is a direct result of McDonnell's failure. I mean, they were all gung-ho. McDonnell campaign is going to be a big step forward for the left in the Labour Party. It's going to be the point at which the left starts to regenerate, and what happened? Straight down the plug hole. And that's the result of it. And it also shows that it's been a big mistake of Respect, to not to intervene on that and to already begin discussing on that. So we agree very much with George Galloway on that. But there's one thing in particular that George Galloway doesn't raise in his letter. And that's the issue of the political profile of Respect. Well, the political profile, what I mean is the policies and programme that appears on its election material in the course of an election. I don't mean so much what's in its formal manifesto, but what appears on the streets in its leaflets and broadsheets in an election campaign. Because something, again, that we've taken up now for the last 2 years is there's been a general dumbing down of political material, public material, to very basic things from economics against neoliberalism and all this kind of thing, but actually with no socialist content. Actually, very rarely does the word socialism appear, and very rarely is there an explicit socialist content. There is in its manifesto, but not in what's reproduced from that on the streets. And in my opinion, I've argued this in the current edition of Resistance, is that anybody wants to go in, a left organisation going into this election with bland politics will get absolutely nowhere against Brown. It'll be necessary to go in with clear, radical socialist politics, clearly showing clearly showing a left alternative. It'll also be necessary to have have a very upfront and worked out programme on ecology and climate change, because this is something else that hardly ever appears on the leaflets, and it's not going to be possible to win votes away from the Greens or to have a clear intervention without a very strong ecological content to it. Now, he hasn't raised any of this, and my guess would be that on this issue we would probably have a difference with both the SWP and with George Galloway in terms of that kind of political profile. But it is a very important issue, because George Galloway says, starting point is very good. I mean, clear, he looks from the big picture. He has clearly decided that he's going to stand again for Parliament. He's been, you know, whatever he's been saying about it, he's now decided he's going to stand again for Parliament. And he's looked at the landscape and realised, A, that there's going to be an early general election. Now, we don't know whether it's going to be, could be this year, could be in the spring of next year, but it's rather unlikely that it won't be. It seems the most likely option, because the Brown Banks is there, and the crisis of the Tory party is there, and it might be the best shot he'll get. So there's likely to be an early general election, and he's looked at Sept and drawn the conclusion that Sept is in no state to fight a general election now or in the next 6 or 9 months. And so a problem. He will be standing. Sept is in no state to fight the election. That seems to be the starting point he's made, which is a pretty reasonable starting point. So he's put in the letter to make a challenge to the situation. Now, if you read the letter, I think it's reasonable that it is a pretty systematic critique of the politics of the SWP and how they run Sept. I mean, it's inescapable that it is. And so from the time that the letter was issued, the issue really has been how would the SWP respond to the letter as the leading, overwhelmingly the leading group inside Sept. And I mean, I've held the view right from the start of seeing the letter that if the SWP take the position that this is a big attack on us and we're going to defend the party, so you know, we're going to and drive towards a confrontation, then it's very difficult to see how Sept would survive such a confrontation. Now, there has been, as everybody will know, no doubt, there has been a delegation meeting between the SWP Central Committee and a delegation led by George Galloway. And I don't know what happened at it, but it didn't resolve anything. At the end of it, it didn't resolve anything. And since that meeting, there has been an all-London meeting of SWP members last Friday night, 200 or so SWP members to discuss the situation and how to approach it, presumably everything else. I've had no first-hand account of that meeting, but from several second or third-hand accounts which seem to fit together quite well, it's fairly clear what has happened at that meeting, and the way that things are currently lining up in Sept in terms of debate. And it's dangerous, in our opinion. It's dangerous. The Sept Party platform on Saturday decided to draft a statement on all this, where we stand in terms of George Galloway's letter and where we stand in terms of the debates that are now happening between the SWP and George Galloway and everything else. And that will be out in the next couple of days. It's just been finally kind of agreed. But what the SWP is saying about George Galloway now is that the divide in respect is between the left, the SWP and others on the left, who defend a kind of socialist framework for respect, and George Galloway and Simon Yacoub and others who have gone over to communalism. This is what's being said. It's a very dangerous one. First of all, the use of communalism is a whole problem in itself in terms of its connotations and everything else. And if we leave that aside and we accept that what's being said or what's being meant by communalism is a major overemphasis on one particular minority community and making political concessions in the process, if that's what is meant by it, which probably is what is meant, then a lot of things arise from that, because it is true, it is true that there have been elements of that, and this is something else that we've taken up. There has been political concessions of that kind. In fact, I think the support given to the religious hatred bill, religious hatred bill was such a concession. So there have been political concessions, but that hasn't all been an issue of George Galloway. That's been something that's been, in my opinion, as much the SWP as it has been George Galloway. And it was a problem because you have to take against that. You can't discuss that without looking at the kind of gains that Respect has been able to make in places like Tower Hamlets and in Birmingham, where they have got big votes and won council positions and made very big gains for the left. And there was always major issues in Tower Hamlets in particular. Birmingham's different because Simon Yacoub is different. But in Tower Hamlets there's always been a big issue about how that Respect group develops and everything else. There's always been a major issue there. There's always been an issue of what kind of political education you have and all that kind of thing, and how you bring people that came towards Respect on a very hard anti-war position and anti-imperialist position, how they won over to a much wider socialist perspective has always been an issue in there, and it's a difficult problem. Nobody questioned it. Nobody would pretend it's other than a difficult question. But now it's being said that, oh well, there are all these problems now in Tower Hamlets, and my reply to it, to the whole thing about these problems in Tower Hamlets, is that I've sat on the National Council, and the National Council has never had a discussion about problems in Tower Hamlets. Never had a discussion on it. I mean, the National Council it's had some very useful reports from the group, from the council group to the National Council, what they're doing in the council, doing this, that and the other. It's had that. But nobody's ever come to the National Council and said, oh, there's these great conflicts going on in Tower Hamlets and they need discussing and everything else. Never happened. And so there's all kinds of, suddenly say now it's all, George Galloway's gone over to communalism, is a very dangerous road. And I think that we have to oppose that. And we also have to say, I think I've now got my last couple of minutes, and we also have to say George Galloway has made various proposals, or he made a proposal at the end of his document for a new high-powered, he says, committee in which he's on and I'm on and some more on, to run the next election campaign. And basically it's a border-based thing. It weakens the SWP representation, strengthens others. That's crudely basically what it does. And he makes that proposal as a way forward. And there is a certain merit in that. But I think there's a few things we have to say about it as well, and that is that If all that happens in respect between now and its conference, or after its conference, because all this is now heading for a conference in November. Next conference is going to be like no other respect conference, no doubt about this, heading for a conference in November. But if all that happens as a result of all this is that a new committee gets set up, with nothing else substantial having changed, then the new committee will have an absolutely hopeless task. That's the problem. And so we could support the setting up of a new committee, but it must go alongside substantial other changes. That's what it really means. And really, if we get down to bottom line, at the present time where respect is, its respect will have difficulty in surviving. It's a crisis. I mean, George Galloway said it's a crisis, and it is a crisis, even bigger crisis than when he wrote it. If it's going to get out of this, then there's only one possibility, and that is the SWP makes major concessions in terms of how respect is run, how its decision-making processes go, its public profile, its political profile. There has to be concessions on all these things. Otherwise, it's very hard to see how it's going to get out of this crisis. So that's the kind of conclusion of the respect body platform statement when it comes out tomorrow. So we do need to play, all those of us who are active in respect, we need to play an active role in this. I mean, Southwark has already had a discussion on it, had a discussion on the document last week. Local branches should discuss it and all its implications. The only possibility is a full and frank discussion, right through respect, right up to the conference, and some serious changes being made. Otherwise it's hard to see where the whole thing is going.